The silt or mud on the bottom of lakes, ponds, and sloughs that have had some vegetation in them has a high food value for humans. Such silt or mud contains the accumulated organic food riches of thousands of years, both from plants, insects, and in some cases, from such things as clams, fish, crayfish. The best way to eat such silt or mud is to make it into soup. It tastes surprisingly good. If lost in the wilderness, mud soup will bring you through in fine shape, which is fascinating. If you starve in the wilderness, it is because you are tired of living. There's always plenty of food to not only keep alive, but to keep you in the best of health.
And then Eric's...
Well, I mean, like, you read that and you mic drop and you're out the door. A lot of beans. We are at my trap cabin in central BC, like Chilcotin, West Chilcotin Plateau. So the Caribou Chilcotin is, ancestrally a land of First Nations who had a lot of free open space, but not a ton of resources. There's no buffalo and stuff here, but there's abundant game. There's trading down with the First Nations down in Bella Coola, the coastal. And as time went on, it's an area rich for ranchers and cattle and cowboys. And as we fast forward a little further through the pioneers and the cattle companies, we get into, a little bit of outlaws, and we get into expats and draft dodgers and hippies in this amazing kind of soup of survivalists, if you will, highly independent people, skillful people. All that mixed with this big, wide open backdrop of not a lot of people and lots of space up here on the interior plateau. That's the Chilcotin. Well, this is a super special place for me, and it's my getaway, and I like bringing good friends here so I can share that. And this is playground, and so we're playing. There's a lot of things that my brain, I'll wiggle my toes at night and thinking about doing that I can only do out here. So that's what we're doing here. We're having fun.
It's Eric's birthday today. It's kind of the end of January. Usually a quiet time of year for us, but Eric and I have been talking about coming to his cabin in the Chilcotin for quite a few years, and this year decided to make it happen, kind of to hang out principally, but thought it'd be just fun to play with a bunch of food fun things. I mean, in the hunting and fishing seasons, we get awfully caught up in the doing of the hunting and the fishing, and it's kind of nice to be in a position where we can just putz around and play with food, which is always a win. So he's down there scoping out on the sled, trying to find a place to punch a hole in the ice tomorrow. And I'm just kind of getting settled in. I've never been here before. It's a pretty exciting place. We're really remote. Got in here on sled after a very long drive. Got a few things to play with. Got some bar stuff to play with, some food stuff to play with. It's going to be a fun few days.
like to flum through that one. Hoofprints in history. Snares. Creative ways to split wood without killing yourself when you're alone. This is all you need to know. This is something that has interested me for a long time. Pond scum soup and mud soup. There's a lot to read here, but I'd like to start with my favorite paragraph, which is, there is actually no excuse for people of any nation to go hungry. People starve to death only through ignorance, not lack of food. There is enough green algae scattered in the world today to well feed a population double of what it is. As this book was probably written 200 years ago. So algae, blah, blah, blah. Now, mud soup. The silt or mud on the bottom of lakes, ponds, and sloughs that have or has some vegetation in them has a high food value for humans. The best way to eat such silt or mud is to make it into soup. It tastes surprisingly good. I'll bet it does. Laurel leaves, wild grape leaves, juniper berries, wild leeks, dandelion will add to its flavor. If lost in the wilderness, mud soup alone will bring you through in fine shape. This is a proven scientific fact, not my personal opinion. But this is a good line. If lost in the wilderness, mud soup alone will bring you through in fine shape. That's all you need.
I try really hard to not lose sight of connecting to the time and place, and we're here in January, mid-January, and there's not a lot of growth, but what there is all the old growth from all the trees and shrubs and all that kind of stuff, and we seldom take the time to really play with the flavor kind of category called smoke. I really respected Eric's take on smoking foods in general because he has commercially sold smoked mushroom products for a lot of years.
Tens of thousands of pounds, easily, of mushrooms I have smoked. Personally smoked in a smoker that I made that is mobile.
A few months ago, I guess, Eric and I were chatting and he mentioned, dude, I came up with a smoke. I found a smoke in the chilcotin that kills alder for smoking foods and meats in particular. And that had my curiosity right up.
I caught some fish up in the mountains where my dad's mountain cabins were, and I needed to smoke them. And I was like, well, there's no alder here, but this looks somewhat similar. And I burned some and it smelled fantastic. And I was like, wow, there is nothing wrong with that. That's going to work just fine. And now it would be a good favorite, if not the top. If you're going to chop a hole with an axe, which sucks, you got to start way bigger than the hole you plan on having. You'll see why. So we'll start. Always been a bush rat. So my parents, they came from Lower Mainland and Vesuvius, and Dad wanted to go to the mountains and build a log cabin and subsist up there. And he was lucky enough; he found a partner willing to do it, and they did just that. They squatted up in the wilderness and they built a log cabin and they lived there. They didn't bother with trying to buy anything, and they lived off the land. Chopping a hole in the ice is kind of the old gold standard. Especially if you don't value your eyes. And then that continued, raised us kids. And as kids, we were sent out. Dad liked his clover blossom tea, so often he'd send us out to the hay meadow before he hayed it and, get those clover blossoms as little jobs of this and that. And Mom and Dad were both totally self-sufficient. So Mom was weaving wool of her own sheep, and Dad was building log houses for locals and shooting the meat, and Mom had a big garden. And so that's how I grew up. Amazing, wonderful childhood, which granted my sister and I a lot of freedom of just kind of running around doing whatever in the woods. It's like burned a spot in the rockiest ground in the country, but
I've been making pastrami at home for a while, and it was a bit of a breakthrough because it put I guess like a deli meat in our fridge that we really, really liked. And then I thought that would make a good fit for coming up here because I could do that ahead at home, and then it'd be stable and cured in that brine. And we could transport it here and smoke it. I needed a smoker to smoke the pastrami.
we burned a big bunch of slash here last night, right? So we could dig some holes in the morning because the ground's frozen. The idea is essentially 2 holes. One hole has your fire and the other hole has the air. I've made a lot of different rocket stove type things in the past. This is a rocket stove in the ground. I just kind of always wanted to make one, and then as we're thinking about smoking, it seemed like a logical way to be able to control said smoke. If you were to just put a fire in a hole, there's no oxygen to get down in there. You're going to make a smoky mess that doesn't go anywhere. So you dig another hole beside it, and then you connect the 2 holes with just a little bit of airflow. And you can adjust that with rocks or dirt to where it's just kind of right. A dirt rocket stove with adjustability is essentially what you got, right? You can't do that with a campfire. And you can't box in the smoke so well with a campfire. You'd have to build a structure, which requires, cloth or hide or something around it. And this is like low technology, easy. So the only hard part with it was, well, it's January and how do we dig in the ground, which was easily solved. That doesn't actually smell too bad. Those dead pine branches. I guess I should open the choke up a little bit. We're good now. It's all wet. It's all snow and everything, but she's good now. It's interesting. Makes a good smoker.
We didn't know if we'd be able to find this buckbrush, this plant, this shrub that Eric had found. All the leaves are dropped, things are just kind of different and a little trickier, look a little bit more homogeneous in the shore areas and the swamps.
So in this willow crop, there may be some buckbrush, but it's very hard to identify this time of year. So I'm looking for something that doesn't look like willow, and then I'll be getting closer.
After picking away at, a number of shrubs, Eric did find it.
So this is what I'm calling buckbrush, and it's got these little serrated leaves. That's about as big as they get, and they're all serrated. It makes sense. The willow in the other swamp wasn't browsed by moose and deer at all. In this whole area, it's like all the tips are gone, and so maybe it's sweet to eat too. Good enough for the moose, good enough for the venison. Certainly no shortage of it.
Whatever the species was now in hand, and we could smoke with it and test out that theory that Eric had, that this is kind of the best wood smoke that he's stumbled upon to date. So once we had Betulina glandulosa in hand, it was kind of a no-brainer that we were going to use that to smoke the venison. We didn't know exactly how to do it, so Eric built a rack out of some willow.
I heard of old-timers smoking willow bark like this, so that's why I'm saving it, and I'll dry it out. I don't smoke. I don't really have any interest, but you smell this right now? That is so sweet and lovely smelling. If I'm going to peel these anyway so that it looks pretty, I'm going to save the willow bark and dry it out and at least light it on fire and smell the smoke, even if I'm not going to make a pipe and smoke it. Next thing you know, I'd be in the closet with a pack of Marlboros. Oh yeah. So this is the scrub birch, Betulina for birch, and glandulosa because it has a bunch of glands on it. And I think those glands might be the resin that makes this a sweet smoke. So around here, it's mostly free, mostly. But from here to here, which is where I'm down more, this I gotta make a giant mess and get through this, and then smash this piece off, scooch it up under. There it is. deep it is. Go down here and get some mud. Not very ideal. But there's enough there for a taste. I don't know about for a big soup. We grew up with a root cellar. So Mom grew a big, huge garden, and, you know, in the fall, all that stuff went into, all the carrots went into the sand in the sand bins in the root cellar, and the other potatoes and all that stuff too, beets. And then, yeah, as kids, fine, Mom, yeah, I'll go to the root cellar and get some carrots. As yes, it was just, you had a big double door root cellar. That was just part of it. It seems kind of crazy to not have one. So you need a cellar to have things basically stay cool in the summer and to not freeze in the winter. And that's part of that survival mentality. You can have all the creature comforts in the world, but actually without a cellar, sure, maybe there's a bunch of jars here and you could do some canning, but at some point all those jars and lids and stuff aren't going to work anymore, and you're going to have to find better ways if it's for a period of time. Well, I don't know, this old chainsaw has been with me forever. It doesn't want to start, and I think it's probably something to do with a bunch of snow getting in it, turning into water. So I'm going to pull the carburetor off, which is new actually. I replaced that last year. And set it on the wood stove for a while and let it dry out. That's phase one.
Eric's a man of many talents, and over the years, I'd known that he had a cabin, a trapper cabin back in the Chilcotin. And there was always this kind of, I guess, bucket list item for me of getting out to this place to check out his cabin, the cabin he built with his dad.
As much as it is my place, in a sense, it's my father living on in this place. You know, this is one of his favorite places to be. He got to build it with his boy. You know, all the things that Dad would want to do. And so this is a shrine, museum / my playground and my place, and all kind of wrapped up into a bundle of sanctuary. Blessed to have had the father I had and the opportunity to have this space with him and share it with him. If we're just talking about the bones of the cabin, my dad couldn't help himself. Everything he built had to last for at least 100 years. So strong, stout, proper roof. And then he was an artist when it came to log homes. So fancy curling beams and woods and stuff. This chair my dad made, he would have, I can imagine him or anybody figuring out how to make a chair, then making a chair, and then by God, sitting in a chair and it works. But the bounty in that experience was making the chair. It's not sitting in it afterwards, because the sitting in it afterwards is a small reward compared to the knowledge. And so anything like that of, you know, the Celtic carving in the bunk bed thing or anything, it's in the process where the nectar is and the memories created. And that's why half the shit around here is functional art. Dad was building log homes, and so he was running chainsaws, you know, all day, every day. And so I just grew up around chainsaws. You know, making notches in log houses and peeling logs, that was just, I was good at that because that's how I grew up. And then out of high school, we'd build log fence out in the bush and rustle fence. Then that grew into other forestry contracts like mistletoeing and 3-metering. So essentially, for a period of time, we were walking clear cuts with chainsaws all day, every day. Then one fall, while I was picking Matsutake pine mushrooms with my dad down in Pemberton, I saw these guys climbing and topping trees on Vancouver Island in a picture, and I basically dropped everything I was doing and said, I'm going to go do that. And so I did that for 10 years as a faller tree topper, wind firmer on the West Coast. And that was high danger, high pay, super tight group, almost like being in the army or something with your boys. All right, so with this nice big dead pine, when you have deadwood, it's a lot harder to control than living greenwood, just due to the nature of the wood. Dry wood snaps, greenwood bends. At one point I had a fall, not out of a tree, but down a steep bank on my way out of climbing trees for the day, and I had a head injury. Didn't seem that bad at the time, but it did lead into psychological issues. Couldn't sleep. Ended up on antidepressants ultimately. And these are the little things that, well, yeah, it'd be easier to say that I just decided to have a wild mushroom empire, but that's not what happened. I couldn't log anymore. I couldn't get up at 5 a.m., go pick up the crew, high stress, up in trees. You could say I had a nervous breakdown, would be the old way it would be said. And so my nerves couldn't take it. And then we can get into the nitty-gritty of how you cut a tree. This is your diameter of your tree. And let's say we want to fall the tree this way. We're going to make about 1/3 of a cut, and then we're going to get rid of this. And we're going to do that a certain way too. We're not just going to make a big bird's mouth. I'll show that to you. Then slightly above this cut, on the back side, we're going to be sawing away this. And we're going to leave this wood here. This is called your holding wood. Then as you put a wedge in the back, it hinges on this wood. It can only go this way. It's going to fold down into this. Much more successful on greenwood than deadwood. And the reason I get into this is because it's important for everybody, I think, to understand that not everything cool is born out of goodness. Crisis and hardship are some of the things that mold us and chip us away into the ultimate person we become, right? So I found myself unable to work. But I could pick mushrooms, and I had a bit of knowledge in that. And so I did that. You know, if I could only sleep a little bit in the wee hours and get up late, that means I could go pitch my tent anywhere and go pick mushrooms. So that's what I did. As the tree starts to go, we can set our saw down or leave it in the cut and just slowly walk while we look up at the tree the whole time into safety. Ideally, you want 2 paths of safety at 45 away from the stump. Let's give this a whirl here. That was the beginning. Stomped around the lower mainland trying to sell these dried pine mushrooms. That didn't work out so well. Nobody really wanted these things, but they wanted other things, other mushrooms dried, and I knew where they grew. So at that point, mushroom picking became a process of healing and an eking out an existence of what I could with the mental state I was in. I was able eventually to go back doing a little bit of logging, a little bit of work to get a little extra money. There wasn't enough money in gathering some mushrooms. But eventually, you know, I could put that gear down. So thus the mushroom business was born. At some point, there was just enough business, you know, at little farmers markets or something where it was a business, and then it just kept growing and growing. We could fall this way easier, but I'm taking it off the lean to kind of describe how wedging works. As you're tapping that wedge in, you're looking up. You're paying attention, because eye in the sky if you don't want to die. Lots of holding wood there. Well, if we're gonna cook a pot to boiling, I want it to look really cool and European and like I know what I'm doing. You could do it a lot of different ways, but it's gonna look good. Watched pots do boil. Who'da thunk?
What do you got there, Eric?
What do you mean? Lunch. Well, we didn't bring the book, and the book didn't exactly have a recipe, so I'm gonna wing it. Well, we sure made fun of that, didn't we?
Yeah. Thanks.
Earthy, slightly earthy, not offensive. You know, I'm sure every pond's different. The local terroir that we have here is makes a beautiful mud soup. Nice day.
Eric and I kind of half expected to try it and go, yeah, no, that guy that wrote that book is just making crap up. But Eric and I both thought it was fine.
You could call it the wilderness chicken. Chicken tastes like whatever you cook with it or whatever you fry it in. This is a base. Nature's bouillon, we shall call it. Swamp bouillon. I'm eating this whole cup. I don't care what anyone says. And if I have gastro upset from it, well then we'll know that it's not worthy of a survival food. And I'll eat some charcoal and I'll be fine. I like it. Got no problem with it. I'm not just doing it for film. I'm almost ready for more.
This place is just an endless adventure space. So I get why little Eric Whitehead growing up here would just like long to get back here to go play. Currently, Eric is off snowshoeing from one lake to another lake just to check it out because he hasn't for 20 years. There's something about getting grayer that makes you appreciate checking some items off of the old bucket list. So if for no other reason alone, this would have been a great trip just for that. Here in this legendary place, hanging out with a really amazing guy in his element. It's really a beautiful thing to see.